beautiful girl.
Yeah. Look at that little...
Moonshiner Tim has been under constant surveillance by Virginia's ABC.
He seemed unstoppable, the proud face of Moonshiners, a man who turned an outlaw's secret into a national success. But behind the fame, something went terribly wrong.
I remember the first raid, I could barely carry 2 gallons at a time. When you're 6 and 7 years old, they don't look at you like that.
Those closest to him say the change was sudden, and the pain he carried was far deeper than anyone realized. What really happened to Tim Smith, and what hidden tragedy changed his life forever? Stay with us to know, in the shadows of Climax. Nestled among the quiet hills of Pittsylvania County lies Climax, Virginia, a small, unincorporated community where life once moved at an unhurried pace. It was here, on December 23, 1966, that Tim Smith was born into a family whose name had long been tied to a secretive and risky trade. For generations, the Smith family had been moonshiners, quietly perfecting their recipes and methods while keeping their activities hidden from the eyes of the law. Tim grew up surrounded by this world. His grandfather had taught his father, and his father passed the knowledge to him. The art of moonshining was not something that could be learned from a book. It came from years of observation and experience. The rhythmic sound of liquid running through copper stills, the careful mixing of ingredients, and the constant awareness of who might be watching were all part of everyday life. For the Smith family, this was not only a means of earning a living, but also a proud family tradition that connected them to the Appalachian culture and its history of self-reliance. As a young boy, Tim began helping his father with small tasks around the still. By the time he was 6 years old, he already understood the value of secrecy and the importance of trust. People in Climax were cautious about what they said and to whom they said it. Stories from that time report that Tim sometimes accompanied his father on liquor runs, helping to hide bottles when there was a risk of a raid. While other children might have spent their evenings playing outside, Tim was learning lessons about patience, observation, and the quiet determination that defined his family's way of life. Despite growing up in this environment, Tim also attended the local school in Climax. He learned his lessons during the day and returned home to a very different kind of education at night. This balance between the open world of school and the hidden world of his family's trade gave him a unique perspective. He understood both the laws that governed society and the reasons why people in his community sometimes lived outside them. Law enforcement raids were a constant threat. Everyone knew someone who had lost everything after being caught. For Tim, each raid served as a reminder that secrecy was not just about protecting a recipe, but about protecting one's future. The tension between survival and exposure shaped his early understanding of the world. However, one particular raid would change everything. When federal agents arrived at his family's property, it was no longer just a matter of losing a batch of moonshine. It was about the survival of a family legacy. That moment forced Tim Smith to face a choice that would lead him toward a future he had never imagined. Fire, loss, and the making of a resolute soul. The raid that struck the Smith family was more than a brush with the law. It was a turning point that would shape Tim's entire outlook on life. When federal agents closed in, the family had only one choice to avoid capture: destroy everything they had worked for. Barrels were dumped and fires were lit as gallons of moonshine went up in smoke. Watching the flames devour their hard-earned product was painful, but the lesson was clear. For Tim, that night revealed the importance of preparation, quick thinking, and knowing when to disappear. As he grew older, the harsh realities of the trade continued to surround him. The same narrow back roads that had once carried the excitement of secret liquor runs became scenes of heartbreak. Many young men in the moonshining world met their end in violent car crashes while fleeing law enforcement. Tim saw friends and fellow runners lose their lives far too soon. Each tragedy reminded him that their way of life carried a heavy cost. It was not just about making a living, it was about staying alive. Yet, amid this dangerous environment, another side of Tim began to emerge. He was drawn to a very different kind of work, one rooted not in secrecy, but in service. Around 2004, he joined the Climax Volunteer Fire Department, where his dedication and leadership quickly stood out. Over time, he rose to become the fire chief. For a man who had grown up dodging danger, he now faced it head-on to protect others. Fighting fires and saving lives gave him a sense of purpose that balanced the risks of his family's hidden world. However, life soon tested his strength in a way no fire or raid ever could. At the age of 34, Tim began experiencing strange health issues, unexplained fatigue, blood clotting, and persistent chest pain. A medical checkup revealed a devastating truth. He had ALK-positive stage 4 lung cancer. The diagnosis felt like a death sentence, but Tim refused to surrender. He began targeted therapy, facing each day with the same grit that had defined his life since childhood. Months turned into a year, and the results were remarkable. The tumor shrank, the symptoms eased, and the cancer faded until only a faint trace remained. Tim had fought his way through yet another battle, proving that resilience ran deep in his veins. With one foot still shadowed by the law and the other battling mortality, Tim Smith stood at the edge of transformation. The hardships that had tested him were about to lead him towards something entirely unexpected, a new chapter of recognition and fame that would change everything. From moonshiner to TV figure. In December 2011, the Discovery Channel premiered Moonshiners, a show that pulled back the curtain on the secretive and often misunderstood world of Appalachian distilling. The series aimed to capture the grit, skill, and risk of those who kept the old traditions alive, often under the shadow of the law. Producers faced a major challenge in the beginning. Most real moonshiners wanted nothing to do with cameras, fearing that any exposure could lead to serious legal trouble. Tim, however, was at a crossroads. After his father's passing, he felt a sense of freedom to share their story, not as a tale of rebellion, but as one of heritage and survival. He understood that moonshining was more than an illegal act. It was a craft handed down through generations, built on ingenuity, community, and pride. When he agreed to be part of the show, it gave Moonshiners the authenticity and spirit it needed to connect with audiences. From the very first season, Tim became one of the most recognizable faces on the show. Viewers were drawn to his calm confidence, his deep respect for tradition, and the honesty with which he spoke about his family's past. For many watching at home, he was not just another outlaw character. He was a man keeping a fading American craft alive. Yet, as the show gained popularity, controversy followed close behind. Officials in Virginia publicly stated that Moonshiners was not depicting real illegal activity, and that much of the content was dramatized for television. This stirred debate among fans and critics alike, raising questions about what was real and what was recreated for the cameras. Despite the skepticism, Tim saw the series as an opportunity to change how people viewed moonshine. He wanted to turn the image of the backwoods outlaw into that of a skilled craftsman. By sharing his father's legacy, he hoped to show that moonshining was rooted in history and heart, not just crime and secrecy. But fame came with a price. As Tim's name and face became widely recognized, old allies began to grow uneasy, and the pressure to move his operation above board grew stronger every day. What began as a tribute to his roots was now becoming a test of loyalty and transformation, one that would force him to choose between his past and his future. Climax Moonshine is born. In May 2013, Tim made the bold decision to go legit, transforming his family's hidden tradition into a lawful business. He partnered with Belmont Farm Distillery in Culpeper, Virginia, one of the few places in the region known for producing authentic, small-batch spirits. Together, they began creating his signature product under a name that held deep personal meaning: Climax Moonshine. The name was a tribute to the small Virginia community where it all began. Climax represented not just a location, but an identity, a symbol of the pride and grit of the people who had carried on the moonshining legacy for generations. With the tagline, "Drink Defiant," Tim's brand celebrated that spirit of resilience while stepping firmly into the modern era of craft distilling. At Belmont Farm, Tim's old recipe found new life. His spirits were made using a careful mix of corn, rye, and barley malt, ingredients that created a clean, subtly sweet flavor with a bold character true to Appalachian roots. The distillery soon expanded the line to include several signature products. These ranged from the flagship Climax Moonshine at 90 proof to the fiery Climax Fire number 32, and eventually a selection of whiskey, bourbon, and rye varieties. Each bottle told part of Tim's story: the long road from hidden stills in the woods to proudly displayed bottles on store shelves. Tim remained deeply connected to the process. Even after the partnership was established, he continued to visit Belmont Farm regularly, talking to visitors about moonshine, sharing stories of his father, and explaining the careful steps that went into each batch. What had once been a crime was now a craft celebrated across the country. Building on this momentum, Tim launched another label, Tim Smith's Southern Reserve, in collaboration with Two Trees Distilling in North Carolina. This line featured whiskey, bourbon, and rye, often aged with toasted oak or infused with flavors like honey and raspberries. The products combined old family techniques with modern innovation, a blend that reflected Tim's journey from outlaw to entrepreneur. The success of Moonshiners also helped boost his brand, leading to spin-off series like Moonshiners, Whiskey Business in 2019, and Master Distiller in 2020. Yet, for all the new attention and opportunity, the transition to legality was far from easy. Tim had to navigate complex regulations, business debts, and licensing rules that were worlds apart from his backwoods beginnings. And while he was winning over customers, not everyone approved. Some old moonshiners saw his move to legitimacy as a betrayal of tradition, while others admired his courage. The law no longer chased him, but the pressure to survive in the commercial market was its own relentless pursuit. Turning illegal shine into a legal brand demanded more than courage. It required reinvention. And for Tim Smith, the next battle would test not his secrecy, but his strength in the open world of business. Business battles, backlash, and betrayal. The world of permits, taxes, and distribution was far more complicated than dodging raids in the woods ever was. Every bottle of Climax Moonshine required layers of paperwork, licensing, inspections, and approval from multiple state agencies. Shipping alcohol across state lines brought even more challenges, as each region had its own rules and restrictions. What had once been a quick sale on a back road now involved contracts, distributors, and lawyers. The shift from outlaw to entrepreneur demanded not only courage, but also endurance. Financially, the journey was just as unpredictable. Reports about Tim's net worth vary widely. Some sources estimate it at around $700,000, while others suggest a much smaller figure, closer to $300,000. The truth likely lies somewhere in between, as much of his wealth is tied up in brand investments, business expenses, and the unpredictable nature of the liquor industry. Behind the growing name of Climax Moonshine, there were still debts to manage and profits to protect. The emotional toll was just as heavy. Tim's decision to legalize divided the community that had once supported him. Many traditional moonshiners, men who had lived and worked in secrecy for decades, saw his move as a betrayal. They accused him of selling out a sacred tradition for fame and money. To them, moonshining was not meant to be bottled for supermarkets or advertised on television. It was a family secret, not a public brand. Tim faced these criticisms with quiet resilience, but the weight of it was undeniable. Between long hours, constant travel, and the pressure to keep his business afloat, he found himself drained both physically and emotionally. The stress affected his health and strained relationships, turning what had once been his pride into a constant uphill climb. Still, he refused to quit. He had spent a lifetime proving that he could survive what others could not, and this was just another test. Gradually, his persistence began to pay off. Climax Moonshine found its way onto shelves in several states, including Georgia, Tennessee, West Virginia, South Carolina, Maryland, and Washington, D.C. To reach more customers, Tim began attending events such as Bike Fest and other public gatherings, using social media to promote his story and celebrate the culture behind his craft. Despite the growing success, the triumph felt incomplete. The business was thriving, but the personal cost was mounting. Each step forward seemed to come with another sacrifice. And when tragedy struck closer to home, Tim Smith would soon realize that not every victory in life feels like a win, and not every battle is worth the war. Loss, doubt, and the weight of legacy. The passing of Tim Smith's father marked a turning point that changed the course of his life. The loss was not just personal, it carried the weight of generations. His father had been more than a parent. He was a teacher, a guide, and the keeper of the family's secret craft. When he died, he left Tim not only a recipe, but also a responsibility to protect and honor everything that had been built in the shadows of Climax. For Tim, that loss became both a source of strength and a quiet burden. Many who knew him believed that his determination to share their story through television and his legal brand came from a deep desire to preserve his father's memory. Every jar of Climax Moonshine and every appearance on Moonshiners felt like a tribute to the man who had taught him everything he knew. Yet it also reminded him of what was gone, of the conversations and laughter that could no longer return. Even as he managed his growing fame, Tim continued to serve his community as the fire chief of the Climax Volunteer Fire Department. Between long days on set and nights spent responding to real emergencies, the weight of responsibility often became overwhelming. He faced burning buildings and road accidents, yet some of the hardest fires to fight were the ones within himself. The exhaustion was not only physical, it was emotional, built up over years of loss, struggle, and pressure. His health, though outwardly stable, remained a constant concern. The experience of battling stage 4 lung cancer had left marks that no medicine could erase. Even after recovery, there was always a lingering fear that it could return. Each checkup brought a quiet sense of dread, a reminder that survival had its own cost. In rare interviews, Tim spoke honestly about the loneliness that fame can bring. He admitted that life behind the camera was far less glamorous than it appeared. The attention and recognition often came with isolation. There were nights when he questioned his choices, wondering if by turning moonshining into a public story, he had betrayed the very tradition he wanted to protect. The struggle between staying true to his roots and meeting public expectations weighed heavily on him. Yet, through all the doubt, Tim kept moving forward. He focused on guiding his son, JT, passing on the same lessons his father had once given him. Together, they continued to protect the family recipe, the symbol of everything the Smiths stood for. Balancing family, business, and the emotional cost of legacy was never easy, but it gave Tim purpose when little else did. As he searched for peace in the midst of success and strain, Tim could not have known that his greatest challenge still lay ahead: redemption, reinvention, and the ongoing fight. Despite facing enormous challenges, Tim never stopped pushing forward. He continued to expand his brand, introducing new product lines such as honey raspberry blends, oak-aged whiskey, and other flavored spirits, all while staying true to the roots of his craft. Each bottle carried the taste of tradition, drawn from the original family recipe and distilled in old-style copper pots. Production at Belmont Farm Distillery in Virginia ensured that every drop still reflected the spirit of the hills where it all began. Beyond the business, Tim's life remained deeply connected to his community and family. His marriage to Shelby, which began in 1986, endured years of struggle and fame, while their son JT carried on the family's firefighting legacy and showed growing interest in the brand. Tim's public image has evolved from an outlaw moonshiner to a respected figure in the spirits industry. Yet, despite the success, he continues to wrestle with questions of authenticity and loyalty to his roots. Can a man who built his name in the shadows ever fully belong in the spotlight? Beneath every bottle of Climax lies rebellion, redemption, and the spirit of a moonshiner who still listens for the sound of boots in the night. What are your thoughts on Tim's journey? Share in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe.